From the headquarters of Talisio English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. Dozens of people in the city of Los Angeles have held a vigil for 7-year-old Jacqueline Cal, who died in custody. The young Guatemalan girl died over a week ago due to dehydration and exhaustion. She had crossed the Mexico-U.S. border with her father, but they were instantly detained by U.S. Border Patrol agents. She reportedly developed a fever and suffered a cardiac arrest at a hospital in Texas. The U.S. is being widely criticized for its handling of migrants from Central American countries.
The U.S. has a history in militarized borders. The U.S. has a history of imperialism and intervention in South America, in Central America, in Mexico, and in many countries around the world. People find refuge in the U.S. However, there is no American dream here in the U.S. I think when a lot of immigrant communities, specifically indigenous communities, come to the U.S., they face many layers of racism and discrimination.
I think that cities across the U.S. ought to be holding vigils on behalf of this little girl and demanding answers as to why did she die, why did they not give her the medical treatment that she needed, why did they put her on the bus for 2 hours before they actually reached help, why did they not believe her father when he told them that she was vomiting and she was running a high fever. These are all questions that we all want. We want to report, we want more transparency out of Border Patrol.
Protests were also held in Washington, D.C. to demand justice for Jacqueline, while her family in Guatemala is asking for a transparent and neutral investigation into her death.
What do we want? Justice for Jacqueline!
In front of the Customs and Borders offices, they are demanding justice for Jacqueline.
You know, it's a crime. We are causing the deaths of these people, and one of our signs says U.S. taxes pay for all of this. So we're all responsible as taxpayers for what happened to Jacqueline and the many, many other people whose names we heard today who have died on the border trying to get protection here in the United States.
In the custody of the border agents, Jacqueline, a Guatemalan girl of just 7 years, died after suffering from septic shock. She had been detained along with her father after crossing the border. The events have caused widespread outrage.
This system, this type of politics, they're unjust, inhuman, and we're here to say that there should be no further investment on the border, no more investment against migration or ICE, nothing more for deportations, and nothing more for that wall.
There have been protests in many cities. However, the tragedy of young migrants is far from coming to a conclusion. In the United States, there are more than 15,000 minors who find themselves in the border custody. In the largest of these camps, in Tornillo, Texas, more than 2,800 are held.
We've gone from hundreds to now thousands of children, kids who've been here for days, who now have been here for months, almost half a year in some cases.
And even though members of Congress will visit the detention center where Jacqueline was incarcerated before her death, the United States migratory policies of Donald Trump don't look close to ending. The threat of paralyzing the government if $5 billion aren't budgeted for the construction of a border wall continues to show the priorities of the administration.
The United Nations is celebrating International Migrant Day. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that migration is a powerful driver of economic growth, dynamism, and understanding. He also explained that migration allows millions of people to find new life opportunities and be of benefit to their new and old communities. According to the International Organization for Migration, it is estimated that currently there are 244 million migrants around the globe, accounting for almost 4% of the global population.
Backed with overwhelming support by the membership of the United Nations.
The 53rd meeting of Mercosur continues in Uruguay. On this second day, Brazil has called for a greater flexibility of the bloc and deeper integration with other economic bodies. Representatives from Bolivia are in attendance as the country awaits authorization as a full member. Mercosur was established to promote free trade and the movement of goods, people and currency. Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay are full members. And December 18th marks the anniversary of the first victory of Bolivian President Evo Morales 13 years ago. With 54% of votes, the movement for socialism won the election and the first indigenous president was elected. Coming from the Aymara community, Morales was a union leader and activist before taking office. In this decade, Bolivia has cut poverty almost to 40% and registers the fifth largest economic growth in Latin America. Morales is set to run for office once again. And 4 members of the Supreme Electoral Court that allowed Morales to be a candidate have been accused of corruption and non-compliance of duties. The opposition says that they have acted in ways that lack transparency and independence. Meanwhile, the Bolivian government believes the opposition is heavily influenced by the United States. Our correspondent in La Paz, Freddy Morales, explains.
Over the
last few weeks, the historic tensions between the United States and the government of Evo Morales have arisen again. For instance, the US has labeled Bolivia as a threat for US citizens for its alleged drug trafficking, which has been taken here in Bolivia with irony and even laughter, as the country is the 3rd biggest producer of coca leaf, with 24,000 hectares, 22,000 are legal and aimed at traditional use. But the US says that this is a threat for the security of its population. However, Colombia, according to the last official figures, has 208,000 hectares for coca and is supported by the US Drug Enforcement Administration. And there are 8 military bases in the territory. All of this has been taken by the Bolivian government as opposition to President Evo Morales and as an attempt to interfere in the domestic affairs of the country.
We thank Freddy Morales for that report. Now, the first presidential debate for the upcoming El Salvadorian elections took place at the National University. Candidates debated the economy, education and security, amongst other issues.
The university called on the 4 presidential candidates, but the coalition of the WIN, New Ideas and Democratic Change Party's candidate, Nayib Bukele, declined to participate, citing organizer bias.
We're not against any candidate. As has been said, this university is guarantee of democracy. This university is transparent, so I ask for respect for this university.
Candidates discussed a broad range of issues. The Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front candidate, Hugo Martinez, said that he will take care of young people at risk, but not leaders of gangs.
I'm going to talk with young people, but I'm not going to talk with someone who has killed 25 people. I'm not going to talk with people who are involved in blackmailing and pressuring young people and making them victims.
Discussing education, Carlos Calleja, candidate for the right-wing coalition, said that education is key to taking the country forward.
We have a project which aspires to look after kids for the first 1,000 days after they are born. Those days are crucial for their development. We also want all of them to study English.
The third candidate, Josué Alvarado, from the Vamos party, which is polling at 1%, also spoke. The absence of Nayib Bukele was surprising, as he is leading electoral projections.
We will take a short break now, but we'll have more news in a minute. Welcome back. The Lava Jato investigation in Peru is at risk. Prosecutors say they're being harassed by public ministry authorities.
Prosecutors in the Lava Jato case have condemned a boycott of their work, which was reportedly started by the public ministry.
When Keiko Fujimori's appeal against preventive detention was heard, prosecutor Vela said that it involves the instrumentalization of the same criminal organization that was led by her through the national prosecutor to harass the prosecutors that are directing the case, amongst others, and disturbing justice.
Pedro Chavarri, general prosecutor and noted as the person responsible for this action, is protected by Fujimoristas in the Congress.
Instead of letting this investigation follow its course, because Chavarri has at least 2 or 3 constitutional complaints that should be processed to the Subcommission of Constitutional Allegations. But they have done the opposite. They have protected Chavarri. The thing is that it's not good for them that someone like Chavarri evades prosecution because he is an instrument of this organization.
Facing the attempt to reorganize the corruption mobs inside the judicial political system, the people have given their opinion.
The people rely on Prosecutor Perez, in the judge, and it should ensure they keep their position because that means we can be confident that they will act appropriately in the judicial system.
If Mr. Chavarri has colluded and they are pressuring him, I don't know why, for fear of death or because of money.
Even President Martin Vizcarra has asked the public ministry not to dismantle the investigation team on the Lava Jato case.
We cannot, as an important institution like the public ministry, be changing prosecutors who are involved in the fight against corruption. So we are giving our full support as the executive whilst respecting the separation of powers, so that prosecutors in charge of these investigations remain in charge until they finish their work.
Meanwhile, Keiko Fujimori awaits the appeal decision on her request against preventative detention, whilst her father, Alberto Fujimori, is also awaiting the judicial response following his appeal to cancel his sentence. Both are hoping to be home before Christmas, aided by their partners in the political judicial system.
A massive fire in Brazil's Amazonian region has destroyed around 600 wooden houses, but caused no deaths. The fire started in the city of Manaus on Monday and was extinguished by more than 100 firefighters. 4 people were taken to hospital for smoke inhalation. It was most likely caused by a pressure cooker left on a stove unattended. The fire rapidly destroyed an impoverished district of the city. Colombian President Evo Morales says the army will not stop fighting the ELN, even after the armed group announced a truce. The National Liberation Army said on Monday they will have a ceasefire for Christmas, which begins on December 23rd and ends January 3rd. They called for the government of Iván Duque to end the military attacks and to restart the peace negotiations. President Duque called off the peace talks when he took office earlier this year. And despite these actions by the government and the army, the Senate's Peace Commission in Colombia has asked both sides to reconsider their stance in a bid to resolve the grave humanitarian crisis in the country.
The ELN recently announced a temporary ceasefire that will start on December 23rd and last until January 3rd. Many see these decisions as a major step on the side of the armed group.
Our organization supports this announcement. This ceasefire will be short, only lasting 11 days, but these days must be used to have a meeting and restart talks between the government and the ELN.
Despite the announcement by the ELN and hope for the government to restart negotiation, President Iván Duque shut down this opportunity.
I think that a clear message has to be sent to those who continue acting violently, who talk about peace while they are still performing violent acts. The only way in which there can be true peace is with the release of all kidnapped people and an end to all criminal activities.
Members of the Peace Commission have pointed out that the ELN's announcement has to be seen as a humanitarian gesture to build confidence between both sides and to resume talks that have been frozen for 5 months.
We have to acknowledge this gesture. Amidst a scene where there was no answer, the ELN has taken an important step, despite it being for a short time. I believe that the answer from the government should be to find ways to strengthen this decision and not to take it as an irrelevant gesture. We have to figure out all the steps that would reactivate talks, and we are going to insist. We'll keep looking for ways despite working with a government that seems unwilling to move forward.
Even with a negative declaration from the government, the ELN has announced its commitment for complete peace continues and they are not giving up on talks. Meanwhile, the Peace Commission will continue to look for mechanisms so that the government fulfills their duty with the Colombian people. 2 activists have been killed in the Guatemalan region of Ixquisis.
The brothers Nari Esteban Pedro and Domingo Esteban Pedro were part of a group protesting the construction of a hydroelectric plant in the region. The activists were shot dead and another person was injured in the attack. Guatemala's reparation program for the victims of the military repression in the 80s is underway in the community of Ixcan. It was restarted just 2 weeks after the 22-year anniversary of the signing of the peace accords.
This is a productive project to provide reparations to the victims of military repression during the 1980s, financed by the National Reparations Program.
During this field visit, we're trying to monitor the cattle given as reparations to beneficiaries.
This is the first installment of a project worth over $1 million. It was abandoned in 2015, but has recently been revived.
The program owes us just over $6 million in regards to cattle purchases. We feel that with this visit and the ongoing audit, we can be hopeful about the next installment.
The National Reparations Program suspended assistance of the project. Nonetheless, beneficiaries managed to move forward with the first part of the investment.
Most beneficiaries have raised at least 1 or even 2 calves from the cattle they were given initially.
These reparations have been restarted at a point when most community members say they feel they're in their twilight years.
Some of us have moved on. They've started the eternal journey before us. I feel authorities do not trust in this project enough.
The National Reparations Program came from the peace accords signed 22 years ago in order to help victims of military repression.
Cuba's National Assembly is set to present this Tuesday proposals to reform the Constitution. From August to November, citizens have promoted several reforms to the Constitution in local assemblies. These reforms now apply to 50% of the document. The topics range from the economy to politics. The new constitution will be voted on via a referendum in February. And our correspondent in Cuba, Alian Fernandez, has more.
Hola, un gusto saludarte desde el Palacio de Convenciones.
We're at the Convention Center of Havana, where the ordinary session of the National Popular Assembly is being held. Lawmakers will receive the final draft bill of the new Constitution of Cuba, which was shaped by the criteria of citizens during the process of popular consultation. 9 million Cubans participated in assemblies in order to provide their input about the text, which was written by a commission of parliamentary deputies. 50% of the Constitution has been modified, a sign of the democratic character of this Cuban process. On Wednesday and Thursday, members of Parliament will study the document, and on Friday they will provide their criteria and will hold further debate. Once approved by this Parliament, a referendum will be held in which citizens will decide, by way of secret ballot, whether or not they agree with this new constitution. In today's session, lawmakers will also discuss computerization in Cuba and the country's housing program.
And we thank Alian for that report, and we'll take a short break now. More news in a minute. Welcome back. Police trade unions in France have said that they will go on strike because of poor working conditions following several weeks of yellow vest protests. The Interior Minister said that he promises to find a solution to pay back the millions of overtime hours accumulated by security forces. Unions have asked for better recognition, better working conditions, and compensation for over 20 million additional hours. The Yellow Vest movement began its protest against fuel taxes, which grew to an anti-government protest over 5 weeks ago. This while the Yellow Vest protests continue across France. Now, while protesting, the Yellow Vest demonstrators said they have found something close to a new family. Protesters said that this is due to the time spent together eating, discussing, and fighting.
There are some people, and it's unfortunately true, that maybe I wouldn't have spent time with. When we arrive here, we have to develop trust. That trust was created when we got to know each other and speak to each other. We told each other things about our personal lives, and it created this closeness, which didn't exist before that, and that's great.
The Arab League has condemned Australia's decision to recognize West Jerusalem as Israel's capital. During a meeting in Cairo, the body also condemned Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro's decision to move the country's embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The Arab League says these decisions are voided.
The decision of the Australian government to transfer its embassy to Jerusalem and the announcement by the Brazilian president that he intends to transfer the embassy of his country from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv when he takes power are decisions that are condemned, voided, and have no legal effect.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and the King of Jordan, Abdullah II, have agreed there is a need to support the Palestinian Authority. Abbas is visiting Jordan and met with the king, who reaffirmed his rejection of Israel's unilateral policies. Abbas is on a regional tour in a bid to mobilize more support for his people in the face of increasing Israeli aggression. In the recent weeks, Israel has intensified its violent incursions into Palestine. The murder of a young woman in Spain has caused widespread outrage. We have more on this and some other stories from around the world.
The murder of a young woman in Spain has brought gender violence to the spotlight once again. The body of 26-year-old Laura Luemnos was found naked after 5 days of search. Her parents reported her disappearance to the authorities, sparking a search joined by 200 volunteers and officials. The police believe she went for a run before disappearing. Russia, Iran, and Turkey are nearing an agreement on the composition of a Syria committee that could pave the way for the drafting of a new constitution and elections after a devastating civil war. The foreign ministers of the three nations began talks in Geneva to seal their joint proposal and seek the United Nations blessing for it. Having fled waves of violence, more than 900,000 members of Myanmar's Rohingya Muslim minority now languish in refugee camps in neighboring Bangladesh. Myanmar's plans to begin the repatriation on November 15th with a group of some 2,200 Rohingya collapsed when they refused to go unless they were granted citizenship and allowed back to their original homes. The Rohingya exodus has produced the world's biggest refugee camp, the result of ethnic cleansing with genocidal intent, according to the United Nations.
We now know from people that they have taken all of our houses and land. But who took them? We don't know. We just learned that the Burmese have started settling there, on our land. I have seen it in pictures we received and information from others. We are ready to return to our own land, but we want our nationality back. We will not accept the national verification card. Why should we take this? We are citizens of that country, and there are 135 different ethnicities living there. So we also want to be there as the 136th. Otherwise, we will not go back.
Masked for centuries by the soot of candles, the mosaics of Bethlehem's Church of the Nativity have been restored in time for Christmas. Restorers took 15 months to clean and repair the surviving fragments of the 12th century masterwork made of glittering gold and glass. Now the restored remains shine against the white walls above the heads of visitors to the church in the Israeli-occupied West Bank city of Bethlehem that marks the traditional birthplace of Jesus.
We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at tellusyourenglish.net. Join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Soini Gray. Thank you for watching.